Hey Internet, it's John here with the Cloud Bureau, and today I have the second in a series of videos that we're doing on data dictionary reporting. If you haven't seen the earlier videos in this series, you'll want to head to our YouTube channel and check out the playlist from the start. This video is talking about what I regard as one of the fundamental building blocks to effective data dictionary reporting, which is defining an approach to and implementing field classification metadata in your org. Now, you might know that when you're creating or editing fields in Salesforce, that Salesforce gives us a range of fields with which we can annotate or classify the fields that are in use in our implementation or not in use in our implementation. And today we're going to talk about those. I'm going to show you what those fields are, how to think about an approach to those fields for your implementation, and then also how to adjust those fields and the values that are available to you if the standard values that Salesforce provides do not meet your needs. So without further ado, let's jump in and head to Salesforce. Now, I'm in setup for a developer edition org, and an important caveat always is that if you're playing around with field classification metadata and deciding on the schema and making adjustments and things of that nature, you'll want to do that work in a sandbox and then ultimately migrate it forward to your production org. I'm an object manager. I'm on the account object, and I've navigated to the edit interface for the account number field, which is a standard field that comes on the account object. Now, when we're talking about field classification metadata, we're really talking about the first four fields here. Obviously, description and help text can also play a role there, but today we're focused on the data owner, the field usage, the data sensitivity level, and the compliance categorization. Okay, for data owner, this field is a lookup relationship field that's asking us to tell Salesforce or to specify who is the responsible party or the data steward for the particular field at which we are looking. Now, it's a lookup relationship, but you can specify either a named user or a public group, and you'll see here that I've put myself in as the user, John Howell, for the data owner for this field. Now, if you're a large org with a great many fields on a large implementation and a big data model, understanding who should be consulted or informed when changes are occurring to fields in your org is an important thing, and you would want to track the data owner. If you're a much smaller org, it might be sort of one person who's the data owner for or the data steward for your organization, and it might be less critical, but something that's really powerful if you want to make sure that you're tracking who's responsible for data stewardship for particular attributes. The second field we have is field usage, and out of the box, Salesforce gives us three options: active, hidden, and deprecate candidate. Now, the guidance Salesforce gives for these values is as follows. An active field is a field that's actively in use in your org. A hidden field is a field that you are thinking about deprecating, and you maybe have removed it from reports and from the UI. And then deprecate candidate is something that has been deprecated and that you might eventually delete from your org. For data sensitivity level, again, we have a range of out-of-the-box options that come default. Those are public, internal, confidential, restricted, and mission critical. And this is really talking about sort of the relative sensitivity of a particular data point in your organization. So if you have a field that only a very, very small number of very high-level users use, it might be confidential or mission critical. If you have a field that's available both to your internal users and maybe on an experience site, that might be public. But range of options here. The last one is compliance categorization, and out of the box we have listed a number of compliance frameworks, governmental compliance frameworks that might be relevant to a particular data attribute in your org. Just as one example, we have PII, which is personally identifiable information, where we might flag things like email addresses and birth dates and names, first and last names of particular individuals. Depending on your geography and also sort of where you do business, you might use various of these frameworks and not others. And so thinking about which ones are relevant to you is going to be meaningful. That brings me to my next point, which is these have default values: field usage, data sensitivity level, and compliance categorization. but the values that are here might not necessarily be the values that are useful and meaningful to your implementation of Salesforce. So the most important thing to do as a first step when you're thinking about implementing field classification metadata is to align with your org and your users on an approach to these fields. What are your usage values going to be? Are you going to use data sensitivity levels? And if so, is high, medium, and low a better sort of set of options for your organization? And for compliance categorization, are there compliance frameworks that are always relevant to your organization, sometimes relevant to your organization, and never relevant to your organization? Once you've aligned on those field values, like the values that are actually going to be available for the classification, the critical step is to define what those values mean for your org. It does nobody any good from a data dictionary perspective if you have a range of different developers who use the hidden value for field usage, but they're all using it to mean different things. And so getting definitional here is really critical to the effectiveness of your data dictionary reporting and your field classification metadata. So you'll want to make those definitions and then publish them and socialize them with the folks who will consume this information and also manage this information so that they know what value to use when it's relevant. Okay, now let's say that some of these values are not useful to you, or that you have different values that you would like to use in your org. How can we edit the pick list values for field usage, data sensitivity level, and compliance categorization? In the case of data sensitivity level and compliance categorization, these are manageable directly in setup, and we'll look at that in a minute. For field usage, you have to go through the metadata API, and we will also take a look at that. But let's start with what we can do in setup. I'm going to open a new tab for setup. And over in Quick Find, I'm going to search data classification. And you'll see under data classification that we have the capacity to download classification values, upload classification values, and then also manage the settings. In later videos, we'll look at upload and download. In this one, we're going to focus on the settings themselves. Now here I can use a default data sensitivity level. That's something that we can sort of apply across the org if you're starting this for an org that's been in use for some time. If you're starting net new or starting or you're updating this, you can use these two links to edit the data sensitivity pick list values and the compliance categorization values. Let's take a look at data sensitivity first. You'll see here that we have those out-of-the-box values for public, internal, confidential, restricted, and mission critical. I could add different values. I could reorder these values. You might even say something like mission critical doesn't make sense in my organization's context, and so we're going to deactivate that value or delete it. But I'm going to leave these as is for now. And we'll go back and look at the compliance categorization values. Again, we can add and subtract values here. And one of the things that I like to do for compliance categorization, even though it's a slight extension of the signification of the term compliance, is to add values for the various integrations that are at play in my org or the org that I'm working in. So let's say, for example, that you have an integration between Salesforce and an accounting system like an ERP. We might want to be able to flag those fields that are bound up in the integration with the ERP. So if I were going to add a new one, I would put ERP integration here, save that, and that would allow me to use that in combination with any of these other compliance frameworks so that I have an easy way to report on fields that are implicated in an ERP integration. Okay, the thing you'll note here is that our field usage values, so like that active, hidden, deprecate candidate, these are not editable here, but that doesn't mean that they are not editable at all. It does mean that you need to get familiar with and get acquainted with the metadata API, and we're going to show that right now. If you are someone who's not familiar with Visual Studio Code and using the metadata API, this might be a situation where you need to phone a friend like a developer, or you can always call us here at the Cloud Bureau. Here I am in Visual Studio Code, and I have an empty SFDX project. There's nothing in it except an empty folder for Lightning Web Components, and I don't have anything in my manifest. I've had down in the terminal a statement that I'm going to run that's going to retrieve metadata. And what it's going to retrieve is the metadata definitions for the value sets that control those 3 pick list and multi-select pick list fields for field classification. Now, these are all of the metadata type standard value set, and then the fields themselves are field business status, that's our field usage, compliance group, which is our compliance category, and security classification, which is our data sensitivity level. I'm going to run this statement. And you'll notice over here that now I do have some information in my standard value sets. And if I expand that, I can see compliance group, which is our compliance categorization. You see the ERP integration that we added. You can also see security classification, which are those sensitivity levels. And then you see field business status. Now, I can add values here, but there is one just little catch, which is that you have to be careful about this grouping string. Grouping string is an enum in Salesforce, which is basically a kind of a set of constants that you can use only values that exist in that set. So any value that I add is going to have a grouping string value of active, deprecate, candidate, or hidden. So just to give you one example of what we might do, and something that I do routinely, I'm going to copy this XML for the deprecate candidate field, and I'm going to paste it down here. And I'm going to change the full name to unused standard field. A lot of times there are fields that come with standard objects that we're using in our implementation, but we're not using specific fields, and we want to be able to sort of say that as part of the field classification. I've added my field value for unused standard field, but my grouping string, it's a version of a deprecate candidate, and I'm going to deploy this to my org. And you can see that our deployment ran, and we can jump back and look at what that looks like in Salesforce. I'm going to head back to Object Manager. We'll go back to the account object, fields and relationships, and we'll grab that account number field. If I go to edit this, you'll see now that in field usage, I can specify this as an unused standard field if we're not using it. So we've covered what are the field classification metadata fields that we have available in Salesforce, what are the default values, what are some considerations that you want to take into account when you are defining an approach to this for your org, including sort of getting real precise about what the active values mean, and then how to manage those lists of values, both in the UI and in the metadata API, if we need to. We're saying that the virtue of working in the metadata APIs, it makes it really easy to deploy forward, but that is the nuts and bolts of field classification metadata. In our next video in this series, we'll talk about how to create fields with data dictionaries in mind using these field classification videos. Until next time, this is John from the Cloud Bureau, and we'll see you soon.